who put the Bomp into your favorite romance novel. I am here with some of my favorite writers at BookFest Fall 2021, and we are ready to tell you all the insider news and tips and all the gossip that we can possibly think of. But first, let's meet our guests. By the way, I'm Elaine Ash. I'm your narrator, and I am a ghostwriter, an editor, a book doctor, and I wrote Bestseller Metrics, How to Win the Novel Writing Game. So let's go to Sharon Buchbinder, right beside me, and please introduce yourself, Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Buchbinder, and the name is not a fake name, just so you know. I married the name, and how lucky am I with that? I have been writing fiction since I could hold a pen, and I have the rejection slips to prove it from middle school and high school. I even wrote a script for The Man from U.N.C.L.E. That's how it tells you how old I am. And on yellow lined pad and sent it in by hand. So that was, but I've always been fascinated by stories, and every story that I've written has always had some element of romance in it. Even when I started writing in sci-fi and horror and mystery, people would say, oh, it has too much romance or not enough romance. And so I jumped wholeheartedly into paranormal romance because it combines all that spooky good stuff together into one great genre. So I also write textbooks. I have the best-selling textbook in healthcare management in the world. So that's my there's my fun fact about me. So.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Next, Susan Mac Nicol. Welcome.
Hi, thanks very much. Can you hear me all, everybody? Yeah, good. I live in the UK. I am it's quite late this time, at this stage, so it's actually quite over my bedtime. I write, strangely enough, I've written MF fiction. I'm also writing gay romance. So I think I'm the only one on this panel that's actually written gay romance so far. I write about men falling in love instead of the other way around. I have been writing since I was a kid as well. I still have all of the stuff that I've written in a box in my garage, just waiting to come out. I love doing the research for the books, and if we get a chance, I'll tell you all about some of the weird things I've done for research later, because I think it's a pretty important topic. I'm also a script writer, and one of the scripts that a friend of mine wrote with me we've already won 10 awards for the screenplay. It's actually based on one of my novels, and obviously we are really hoping someone someday will actually decide that they're going to do the film. But for now, we'll just keep entering it in script competitions and just hoping that we're going to win.
Thank you, Susan.
And that's about it.
Thank you. And Clive Rose from Australia,
Oh, wow.
We would love to hear more about you. What time is it over there?
It is 8:15 on Sunday morning.
Wow.
It is, we're in our first week out of lockdown after 3 months. So that's pretty exciting for everyone. I went out yesterday, didn't do a lot, had a high tea though, because I write historical romance, and I have to say that is one of my favourite things to do. 2 weeks ago, my exciting moment was one of my novellas in a collection along with much bigger named authors than myself hit #1 on Amazon, which was exciting. So now I can officially call myself an Amazon #1 best-selling author, and I intend to do so at every opportunity, including this one, because I work my butt off on that one. And most of my novels are set in the Regency period, and I adore research. I could research without ever writing a word, to be honest. I fall into research rabbit holes really easily, and it often starts with something really small, but it's one of my favourite parts of the process, learning what was and wasn't done, learning if a word is even possible to use, if it existed at that time, if they would have said that, if they even would have had that thought couched in those words when you're doing in a monologue for a character. That's a lot of fun for me. I live in Sydney on the East Coast, and spend a lot of my time at the beach, and I try to put something oceanic, or at least a body of water, in every story I write. They tend to just pop in there anyway. So I'm sure it's inspired by the vistas I run past all the time.
Okay.
And I've been writing also since I was a kid. Yeah.
Thank you, Clive. All right. Now, Adrianne.
Hi.
Tell us about yourself.
Okay. Well, my name is Adrianne Monson, and I guess it must be a trend to be writing since we've been kids, because I did that too. I won my first writing contest in 5th grade, and that was a very exciting moment until they told me I had to read my story out loud to everybody, and then it wasn't so great. I've written paranormal romance, retold fairy tales, and I also dabbled in a genre mashup of historical paranormal romance, which is probably my favorite project I've done so far. And I am currently working on a dystopian series.
And is that romance?
Well, I have to have romance in everything I write.
Okay.
Yes, there's going to be romance in there for sure.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. The first thing in my research that I did, romance is still the top selling genre of all the genres. It for a while, crime and mystery outstripped romance, but romance always, has taken the lead again. How is business? Are there lots of outlets? What was your journey, easy or not so easy, to getting published? Who would like to start?
I don't mind starting. I'll start.
Okay. So please.
I will. I started as I say, I started writing ages ago, but I'll tell you the reason that I started writing romance, because I'm actually not a romance novelist. I have never read it before I started writing. So that's something a little bit weird. But I have a thing for Benedict Cumberbatch. And I'm sure you all know him out of Sherlock. And I used to drive 70 miles to work in the morning and 70 miles back. So I actually had a long time to think. And while I was doing it, I was having these conversations with Benedict Cumberbatch in my head. And he, we were kind of making up all these stories, and I was going and being squired out by this gorgeous young bloke, this actor. And eventually I thought, you know what, that actually sounds really good. I'm going to put it into a novel. So I did, because I knew that the only way to have a Benedict Cumberbatch was actually to have my own that I wrote about, because there's no ways in Hades that I'm ever going to actually get to meet him. So I wrote a couple of male-female novels. They didn't do well. They really didn't. I was a debut writer. The market was already so saturated. And while I was doing research for one of my other books that I intended to be MF, I had a bisexual serial killer in it. And I thought, well, I need to know how these people think. I need to know how gay sex works. I need to know how men get it on with other men. So I got involved with, there's a very good group on Goodreads called Gay 101, which tells you everything you need to know from actual people that experience it. And through doing that, I actually learned a lot about what we now call the MM genre, or gay romance. And eventually
we'll get into that in a bit, but what I actually opening was your journey to getting published is the focus of this question.
Well, once I've written the actual Starlight series book, I simply submitted it to a publisher. It was the first one I'd ever submitted it to. I'd had my eye on them. They're called Burroughs Publishing. They were very small at the time. They only had half a dozen authors on. And to my very big surprise, they actually accepted it straight away. And I've been with them ever since.
Not too many people have that experience. That's amazing.
No, they took a really good chance on me. They said I was a good storyteller, but my writing craft was execrable, so I had to learn it. And I did. And
then did you get an agent, or?
No, I didn't get an agent. I simply, stayed with the publisher. And now I've published just over 35 books with them.
Very nice.
Astounding. And we'll come back to the steamy side, I promise.
No worries.
So, Sharon, can you tell us a bit about your journey to publication?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I mentioned that I wrote textbooks, and in between dabbling away at short stories, my textbook writing took off. And when I was promoted to full professor and got tenure, I ran away to our summer home, and I made myself write a book. And it was terrible. It was the worst book ever, I swear. I rewrote it 10 times. I could have used your services, Elaine, because book doctor, oh my God, it needed a medic. And so it was just, at first I wrote it in first person, and then I was told, oh no, you can't do it in first person. Then I was told to do it in third person 10 times. So I took that book and, like many authors, shoved it in a drawer and said, see you later, and wrote another book. And the book I wrote after that was Kiss of the Silver Wolf, which was a paranormal novella. And that is actually the book that gave me my pro status with Romance Writers of America, because I sold enough copies of it to be considered a pro and PM, gave me my published author network status. And that was published by the Wild Rose Press, who, like Susan's publisher, took a big risk with me. And they were willing to, at that time was 2010, they were a relatively new, small e-book publisher. They were taking on authors and working with them developmentally. And I have had a wonderful long-term relationship with Amanda Barnett, who is now the head of paranormal editing. And she's just been terrific. Every book that I've written since then has been with her as the editor, with the exception of that mystery, that terrible mystery that I pulled out of the drawer and looked at it again and sent it in. And they said, I think with a little work, this might be okay. And they published it. It's called Some Other Child. So I also have books published. I was approached by Cat's Paw Cove Publishing. Say that really fast. And these are two authors, Catherine Keene and Winter Daniels, who set up their own little magical town in Florida that's inhabited by supernaturals, magicals and regulars. And they wanted to know if I wanted to contribute to this series. And so I now have 4 books with them, and it's been so much fun creating them. And both book companies, both publishers have been extraordinarily kind to me. They've been good to me. And I know there are horror stories with other publishers, but I've been very, very fortunate that I've had such good relationships. And I tried to get an agent. I didn't get an agent. And I said, to heck with it. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And it's fun. It's good.
That's amazing. And just for our watchers, a novella is a story like a novel, but it's shorter than a novel. I'm not sure. Sharon, do you know the word count for novellas and romance?
It depends on the publisher, but generally speaking, it's between 25 and 35,000 words. Anything over 55,000 is considered a novel. And then, of course, there's your short novels, 55 to 65, 85 to 90. Pretty much 90 is the top upper limit for a romance novel. Once you go past that and you hit 100,000 words, then it's considered no.
Okay.
That's a no. Unless you're doing high fantasy. And then high fantasy, bring it on. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Adrianne, your journey to publication.
Well, I have a very different story than everybody else. So I actually got several rejections in the beginning. Of course, I think we all need to experience that as a rite of passage, right? And then I was able to sign with a small publisher. They had just started their business and they were local to my area. And they signed me on a contract for my trilogy, which was a vampire trilogy in the paranormal romance genre. And I'm not going to say anything bad about this publisher. They really got my foot in the door. And I learned so much by signing on with them. So I'm forever grateful for them for doing that.
Do you want to name them?
Well, it's called Jollyfish Press, but they got bought out by a different company that only does YA books or young adult books. And so once they got bought out, this was after 4 or 5 years of me being with them, I was able to have my rights reverted back to me. And I self-published the trilogy myself. I redesigned the book covers myself. And I actually had a really great experience with it. And I was able to advertise a little bit easier with having all the control myself. Mm-hmm. And so from then on, I just became self-published.
what an amazing story. And there's so much in there to talk. I'll come back to getting your rights back. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Clive, your journey to publication.
Yeah. Well, I started, like most people, writing very young, and I started writing. I was addicted to mythology and research, and I started combining. The first things I started getting noticed for were paranormal. There's a short story that hasn't actually. I worked on it for 13 years, so I know it's decent.
Wow.
But it just doesn't fit quite anywhere because it's historical because of the mythology. It's paranormal because of the demon. And I sent it everywhere, and everyone came back with, "We don't know what to do with it, but we like it very much." And I thought, "Oh, that's lovely," sort of. Anyway, I also, the first full novel I ever wrote was awful, and it's still awful, and it's still in the bottom drawer that I put it in like 20 years ago. And then I stopped writing for about 20 years. I just kind of got frozen. And then I came back to it about 8-9 years ago, pulled out half-finished stories. They were all historical, most of them inspired by Jane Austen, so they were Regency. So I thought, well, let me see if I can finish these. And then I took the best one to the Romance Writers of Australia conference and pitched it live to Burroughs, Susan and I with the same publisher. And they liked it, or Susan liked it. Susan's my editor as well. And that was my debut Regency romance novel. Since then, I've published a novella with them, and I got asked to contribute to 2 Regency collections in Australia, which I've done. That's the one of those is the one that went bestseller. And that was my experience with indie publishing. But because it was such a collaborative effort, I didn't feel like I did very much apart from proofing, because I used to work as an editor, so I'm not bad at proofing, and I'm quite quick. But it was interesting as well because all the writers used different. Not everyone used the same version of English. There are American authors in there for the first time who contributed, and they used US English. I think I use English, but it might be Australian English. So that was an interesting experience, and that's been my first experience of learning how to market something like just with the other authors, but also without a publisher. And that's been a good experience for me because I found all these new channels and collaboration opportunities which I didn't know about, which I'm hoping will help me with the rest of the books I have coming out in the next year. And the story I sold to Burroughs is one of 3, so I've nearly finished the second one, so that's exciting. But they've been lovely. They've been absolutely lovely. I can't say good. But yeah, it was quite scary when they sent me the letter saying they wanted to do it, and I actually put the contract on my desk and didn't touch it for like a month, and it was like a snake. I was scared of it. My biggest issue was being my own mindset to get past my own fear and mental garbage, not the industry itself.
Okay, so this is going to be a short snapper question. How long did it take you to write your first novel, and how long does it take you to write a novel now? Susan.
I wrote the first one in probably about 2 weeks. It now takes me 3 to 4 months to write one. I'm not the same as I used to be.
Wow. Sharon.
My first terrible novel took me, I would say, 2 years to write it, rewrite it. And most recently, I would say I wrote my latest novella in a month and was able to send it into my editor, and it's coming out in November. So I wrote it in July. So the process has gotten faster for me because I've gotten more skilled as a fiction writer, whereas before I was trying to be an academic writing fiction. And you have to be a fiction writer writing fiction, not an academic writing fiction.
So you two have both flipped. One wrote very quickly, now it takes more time, and Sharon takes less time. Adrianne.
Yes.
Well, my first novel, I think it took me about 6 years to write. It was a little bit of a dabbling here and there while I worked and had kids. And then, of course, you just learn to write faster and more proficiently. It does depend. I went to a writer's retreat once and I wrote a whole novella in about 4 days, which was awesome.
That is awesome.
But generally speaking, it takes probably about a year, maybe 9 months to write a full-length novel these days.
For you, okay. And Clive?
To get the first draft out used to take me, my very first ever novel took me about 8-9 months to get the first draft out. Now I'm quicker, and also the first draft is less bad. I won't say publishable, but I'd say less bad, simply because I'm a better writer now than I was then, and what comes out on the paper after marinating in my head for longer is better than what used to come out. So my first draft now is about what my third draft used to be when I was not as good a writer as I am now, because I've been doing it for longer. And so now it takes me to do a novella. I can get a novella written in a week. I can get it ready for publication in about 1 to 2 months. In 3 months, I could actually make it really, 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 really good. But a full-length novel, I would say a month to get the first draft out, and to get it to a stage where I wouldn't let Susan see it at that stage, not for any money. It's got to be, so I'd say about 3 months, 4 if you want it to be amazing. And if I had absolutely nothing else to do, like no kid, no work, no life, nothing. But and personally, to me, that sounds like heaven, but it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Right. So now I'm going to ask each of you, and maybe you'll have a different answer to it. What is the quintessential romance novel for you? Aside from genre, what makes it romance? What hooks you in the most? Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay, Sharon.
In preparation for this, I went and reviewed my novels that I have loved to read and reread. And I'm going to say, hands down, it's Lord of the Scoundrels. It is one of the most amazing romance novels. And the reason it hooked me is because the heroine was smart. She was nobody's fool. The hero was also smart, but he was tortured. And they had this wonderful, witty repartee. She has this grandmother who is outrageous. She has a horrible sot of a brother. And she is just this bright and shining star. And he's just this dark person. And it comes together because there's this amazing chemistry, but it's characters. It's all about the characters for me, no matter what romance novel it is, whether it's that one or any other. If the characters don't jump off the page at me, I am not interested. They have to leap at me.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Now, Susan, just as an aside, before I let you answer, I will tell you that one of my favorite novels when I was young was The Front Runner, which was a gay genre. Right. It was like one of the first big breakout novels. And it really spoke to me, even though it was 2 men. So can you tell us what in a romance novel really, gets to your heart, really hooks you emotionally?
I think it's because we all have this view of men as being stalwart, strong, and, not having any feelings and that type of thing. And I think the whole thing about writing a novel with 2 guys is just like anything else. It's a developing relationship. They have the same fears, the same idiosyncrasies, the same insecurities as anyone else. And I think that is what drives me into a novel. It's actually the interplay between the characters. And I'm a big fan of developing relationships in terms of, bringing 2 guys together that are completely different, same as with a male-female book, but you're actually playing it out amongst male strengths. And it can be quite difficult to do because obviously you're not a man. So you have to use your imagination, the same as a man writing with female protagonists isn't a female. And but inside, everybody's still the same. We're all still the same. We have the same emotional insecurities, the same needs, the same wants. And that, for me, is one of the most important things about reading a novel and getting involved in the characters.
Beautifully said. Clive, What drives you when it comes to romance?
The characters, and I like the characters to have depth. It's all very well to be witty, but I mean, far be it for me to pick on the queen of Regency romance, but Jane Austen's men you don't get in their heads at all. Mm-hmm. And I'm not criticizing her. She basically, the novel itself was a fairly new form in those days, but and also gives the people who make the film and TV adaptations plenty of room to work with in terms of imagining dialogue, which is great. But you never get in their heads at all, because all the books are the author's perspective, definitely, but also the heroines. And I think that's a shame, because, I mean, there's endless speculation about what Darcy's thinking at any one time and all of that. I mean, there's whole forums devoted to his inner thoughts. And I like to see that. And that's a fairly new thing for when I say fairly new, not to me, but, you know, a while ago, about 50 years ago in romance, there wasn't as much of that from both characters' perspectives. It was usually only one, or it was written more of a third person thing. And I think getting into their heads is really interesting. But what really grabs me, the depth, seeing the depth of their characters, which you can only see if you get in their heads, because most people don't say what's going on inside them. They say something else, and the thing that's going inside them might drive them to say it. But what they say isn't, I feel this. Like they say, it's the same as when you ask someone how they are, and they might be having the worst possible day, but they'll say, I'm fine, thanks. And then they'll cry. Well, obviously they're not fine. But if you just heard the dialogue, you wouldn't know that. So you need all of it.
You utilize internal dialogue, which is that correct? You utilize the internal dialogue in your books?
Yeah, and also how they demonstrate that, because it's a book. You have to show. You're always told show, not tell. And you often have to show a character doing something contrary to what they've said. They might say they're fine, and then they might take their gun and shoot it out the window because they're not fine. Right. And you know that as the reader because of what they did, not because of what they said. And that is a human thing to do. It's the humanity that grabs me. And if they're too perfect, honestly, I'm not remotely interested. There's a reason no one remembers Henry Tilney as well as Darcy, because he's too perfect. He absolutely does nothing wrong whatsoever. It's very, very boring as a reader. And I often think of them and I think, yeah, there's only been one film made of that book, interestingly, out of all her books.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because there's not as much tension, and it's also one of her earlier books. One of the first things of my writing mentor said when they read my first draft of the book that became my debut novel is, your heroine is too perfect. You need to mess her up a bit. Give her something. Give her a temper. Give her bad PMS. Give her something. It's a Regency. Yes. No one has PMS, but yes. we work with what we have.
I see that in romance, in that the writers, they're so in love with their characters that they'll make one character, either the hero or the heroine, perfect. And no, everybody has a flaw, and that's what
at least one. It's the humanity that grabs me, and I'm looking to see how human people can be and how much they can stuff up and how much they come back from it, because that's the part that's fictional. Most people in life stuff up and they stuff up. They don't stuff up and find a way to sort it out, because, you know, real life is not as beautiful as fiction. So, yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Adrianne,
well,
what absolutely floats your boat about romance?
I definitely have to agree with the other panelists as far as the depth of character is very important. I also like to have a really good organic conflict. If it feels like it's really contrived, they're not together for a simple misunderstanding that if they simply had a conversation, there wouldn't be a conflict anymore. I really don't love books like that. So I want to have depth to the plot as well as to the characters.
So can you give me an example from one of your books, what a really deep conflict would be?
Well, in my vampire trilogy, the romance characters are estranged because when Sorry, this is going to be a little bit of an explanation. I hope you stay with me for this. So when vampires came into existence, forever ago, she and her husband worked with her father, who was a shaman, to create immortals to fight vampires. And the night that her husband was going to become an immortal is when she was kidnapped and forced to become a vampire. And so they're on opposite ends of the races. And he never forgave, he didn't forgive her for that for like 1,000 years or more until they come to the present day of when the book starts.
That's a conflict.
That's a conflict.
I like that. That's good.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, let's see. Did I get through everybody? Yes, I got through everybody. Let's talk about the subgenres of romance. Because we've talked about vampires and paranormal. We have the gay LGBTQ aspect, historical. Can we talk about some subgenres that haven't been mentioned here that perhaps our watchers or our listeners need to know about or could check out? Sharon?
There are lots of subgenres.
I'm sorry, Clive, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there are so many. That's the cool thing about romance, because love is such a human thing. Hearts are so human. Dark romance is one that that I read in a bit.
What is it called?
Dark romance.
Dark romance.
Stuff like I struggle a little bit with that label, because some of the things considered dark are not. Like if 365 Days is possibly a dark romance. I haven't actually read the book, firstly because it's in Polish, or it was. I think I've just done a translation, and I didn't watch the show on Netflix. It's not something I'm into, but it is quite a popular subgenre for a lot of readers.
Okay, another one.
Well, don't forget the thrillers. I love the thrillers with the romance in them.
Oh, the romantic suspense too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm having a little go at that. Cross your fingers for me. It'll be new.
Will do.
Good. Adrianne, did you want to? Yeah, tell us about romantic suspense or a romantic thriller. What do you need in that to make it a thriller?
Well, I think it's just the elements of suspense. Usually it means their lives are at stake or somebody is after them. It can even cross over into the action genre. Mm-hmm. Yeah, crime involved. I mean, it depends on which way you're going with it. But I love the elements of the suspense mingled with a developing buddy romance with all the heightened emotions tied into it. Yeah.
Beautiful idea.
Yeah. And which one's foregrounded, the romance or the mystery?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The other one sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, carry on, Sharon. No, carry on.
No, I was just going to say erotic romance. I mean, we're always being asked, do we do everything we write about in our novels? And so erotic novel, really opens up that can of worms when you go in the back in the good old days, when you go to conferences that weren't romance related, like my husband's medical conferences. And my husband would say very proudly, my wife is a novelist. And they say, oh, really? What do you write? And I'd say, romance novels. Oh, isn't that the dirty stuff? Well, a few of them are, but, not all. And so it's one of those things. But erotic romance has so many opportunities. I wrote Desire and Deception, which is an erotic romance, but it is also noir because I really love that dark piece. And, everybody doesn't always get an HEA, and the bad girl actually gets away at the end of the story. And so I had a bunch of people scratching their heads going, but I love this story, but she got away. The bad girl got away. What is that about? So I think that, romance really has so many opportunities for all of those mixtures that you can put it all together, and contemporary also. I've never been a really big fan of contemporary because I always want a little bit more plot, but that's just me. There are some people who can make.
I love reading it. I cannot write it. I have tried.
Yes.
Tried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get bored.
Well, if I can add on to your comments, I actually think there's a lot more romance in pretty much everything than people are willing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
If men want to go see an action movie, there's still going to be a small element of romance in the action movie.
That's true.
I love action films too. I like it all. I actually erotic romance is very interesting to me as a reader. I find it quite interesting. I had to write. I wrote a sweet romance.
Quite interesting, yes.
Myself could not do
Quite
it.
interesting.
It took me 8 times longer to write a sweet romance than to write a hot one. I tried. I did the Christmas novella that's just come out is sweet, and that was really difficult for me because I used the sex scene specifically to demonstrate character, and I could not do that this time.
Susan, I know you've got a lot to say. I can see you bubbling away up there.
Sorry.
Oh, no. Gay romances, again, you get a load of genres. You get the dirty stuff. You get the erotica. I write contemporary. I've also written paranormal. Probably going to be branching into urban fantasy soon because that's one of the genres I really enjoy. But
now, just tell us what urban fantasy is, please.
Urban fantasy is fantasy that is set in today's world. So if you think of, current day London, Ben Aronovich writes a wonderful series called The Rivers of London, which it has elements of romance, just as Adrianne was saying, but it's about this whole thing in the Thames and it's monsters in the Thames, but set in the actual today London. And that is what urban fantasy would be.
Wow, it sounds fascinating.
It is. It's really good. If anybody's ever seen the Harry Dresden films, the Wizard, that's urban fantasy. But as well as gay romance, you get a lot of stuff. There's a huge genre for BDSM, and that type of thing. There's also things that I'm not particularly keen on, like twincest and what we call forbidden romance, which is very much the darker side of, brothers having sex with brothers and that kind of thing. And it's not my favorite genre, but there is what we call a taboo genre, which is kind of all the stuff that generally you wouldn't write, but it actually works for some writers.
Oh, I haven't even heard that term, the taboo genre. So
taboo,
I'm learning so much in this panel.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I love talking about this. Sorry.
Can I piggyback on the taboo genre because I'm president of the Paranormal Romance Guild. We have a large review staff, and people send in, tons of manuscripts, and we live to serve romance authors. That said, there are not just our website, but there are many other review websites that will not review certain kinds of books. And so when you're writing these novels, you need to know well ahead, what are the limits? Is incest taboo for PRG? Yes. Is bestiality taboo? Absolutely. Is rape in scene taboo? Yes. Baby killing? Oh boy, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of things that if you're going to be writing these novels that contain these elements, be aware going into it that you may struggle to find an organization that will review it for you. So just a caveat in that sense.
Okay, let's switch to, I would love to hear if each of you had ever entered contests and if there are any contests that you can recommend. Because we know that when you place or shortlist in a contest or win it, that is something that goes on your bio and it stays there for your lifetime, and it can actually open doors to agents and publishers. So let's talk about contests for a bit. Anybody want to go first?
I'll be happy to jump in there. I used to be a contest coordinator for Maryland romance writers, and I've been contest coordinator for a number of other large writing organizations, I cannot say enough good things about contests for writers. It's a great way to hone your skills. It's a great opportunity for you to get feedback before you go to a publisher or before you submit to an agent. It's really, an opportunity for you as the writer to receive that, but it's also an opportunity for other writers to give that kind of feedback in a constructive manner. I've won a lot of writing awards. My romantic suspense series, The Haunting of Hotel La Belle, has really been probably my most award-winning one, and I won awards from the National Excellence in Romance Fiction, a Royal Palm Literary Award competition, the Roan Awards. I've received a Roan Award. So these are small. Roan is for a small press, but all these others are for bigger press.
Is that ROAN?
RONE, the Roan Award. It's part of the In Detail magazine, and I recommend highly submitting your books for review there. And covers, they have a cover contest. And every year, just last weekend, TJ has this big awards event. She streamed it. And it's fun. And you actually, I'm sorry I don't have my award with me here, but you actually get a beautiful crystal award with that. And so it was a big deal when I won in 2018. And this year, I received a similar trophy from NERFA. And it's just a really good feeling because this is a kind of writing is solitary. You don't get a lot of direct feedback, and these kind of events, these contests can help to give you that direct feedback. And when you win, even if you I finaled in the Roans this year, I didn't win, but it's such a good feeling to know that somebody loved your book enough that they wanted to make you a finalist. So,
Claudia, any experience with contests?
Yeah, I enter whenever I can. One of my short stories, which was paranormal, it won an erotica award, which I was surprised by because I didn't think it was erotic, but what would I know?
And what was the contest?
It was you had to write a scene that demonstrated
the name so that listeners can know about these
Sexy
contests.
Scribblers. It was the Sexy Scribblers contest by the Passionate Inc. chapter of RWA, Romance Writers of America. I don't know if they're still with RWA, but I am still a member with them. And it won for best scene. And it was basically, I pulled it out of my short story. I top and tailed it to explain the scene, which they gave you room to do. And it won. And that was really exciting. And that gave me the confidence, I think, to finish other stories and pitch. And in Romance Writers of Australia, which I'm also a member of, they have a great contest where you can submit your first 3 chapters plus your submission letter plus your synopsis, so basically your pitch, and that gets critiqued and you get feedback on that from publishers and agents who sit on the panel. And I think that's a great contest. Wonderful. So you know how you're pitching. I finaled in a few contests last year, and honestly been too busy to enter that many this year, but I will enter more. And I think it's also the other thing it does is it gives you the experience of writing to a deadline.
Are those what you just talked about,
which,
the 3 chapters
trying to fit it in around your life, which a lot of writers do? That's a discipline.
What you just mentioned of getting the 3 chapters vetted, is that only open to Australian romance?
No, Romance Writers of Australia is open to any author from anywhere. We have quite a lot of New Zealand authors who are members of both organisations because they're right nearby. And there are Aussie writers who are members of the American one, like myself.
Right.
So I don't think that they have there are British authors too who are members of RWA and they enter. So yeah, it's worth joy. I always found the organisation hugely supportive. I'm actually a bit excited because our conference was meant to be in August, but no one could go. So they've moved it to December, and now we can go. So we're actually going to be able to meet in person for the first time in 2 years.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It's really exciting. And I'm quite introverted, like a lot of writers, but every now and again, it's nice to sit down and talk to people who get the angst of where to place a comma. It's not a conversation you can have with everybody.
Yes.
I would have come to dinner, but I was fighting with a paragraph. Only writers get that. Adrianne,
Contests. Any experience? Or any
Yes.
you can recommend?
Well, I've entered a few with Romance Writers of America. Most of them were through my local chapter, the Utah chapter, and I won a Great Beginning contest, which was just the first chapter. And I've won a few other ones around here with the Utah Writers chapter group. But I would recommend.
The Utah Romance Writers.
Sorry?
Is the group the Utah Romance Writers?
No,
Or?
it's not Utah Romance Writers. It's just Utah Writers. So it's any genre.
I see.
But I highly recommend entering those contests because the ones that give you the feedback really do help. And they can give you that great experience that will help polish your writing. And even if you don't win, it's highly beneficial. And now I'm on the other end, and I've been a judge for a writer's contest. It's at a place called Storymakers, which is also local here. So for Storymakers, I get to judge the speculative fiction genre. And I always have a lot of feedback to give the writers when they submit, whether it's amazing or whether it needs a lot of work. They get lots of feedback, so they get their money's worth just by submitting.
Good to know. Susan.
Hello.
Contest?
Yeah. Strangely enough, I've had 2 Paranormal Guild awards for one for Love and Punishment, and one which is a detective suspense, thriller suspense, and another one for Double Alchemy, which is my paranormal suspense. And I've had the Reader's Book Fair Award for another book of mine called Living on Air. So I've done all right with them. I don't enter all that many. As I say, I tend to enter on the script writing side, and I've become a bit experienced with it now because we've won the 10 awards for the things that we've submitted to. Of course, there's the other 20 that we've submitted to that we haven't got anywhere or placed. But what happens is most of the screen guys give us a bit of a treatment afterwards and tell us what they found lacking in the script. Then I'll get on the phone or on the Skype with my partner in LA, and he and I will then go through it and we'll tighten it up, and then we'll send it off for another contest. So yeah, it's just a hit and miss.
What do you do if you disagree with the criticism? How do you handle that?
We ignore it. Just ignore it. Because some of the criticism shows that they actually haven't really read the story. They might have only read the treatment, which is sort of the synopsis of the story. And other stuff is blatantly in the book. And we've had a lot of other script writers check it before we actually sent it off. So we tend to ignore some of it. But most of the criticism is very good, very well organized, and we actually do take it on board. And each reiteration makes the script better.
Excellent. Now, I'm just looking at our time. We're at 48 minutes, and it's a hard out at 55. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. That's about 2 minutes each to finish up. I know that maybe you came in wanting to talk about something that my questions didn't completely cover. So why don't we start? Is it okay if I just throw the floor open and you can tell the people watching anything that you want to discuss, whether it's about your own writing or whether it's about the business or whether it's about characters, whatever it is, and you can just download it. Let us know. Clive?
There's you go, Clive.
Well, on the 8th of October, I had my Christmas novella released in a collection of 10 called Sweet Christmas Secrets, and that's out now on Amazon. That was my first and probably last go at a sweet romance. As I said, it was a massive struggle, but I wanted to challenge myself. And keep an eye out for the sequel to Always a Princess.
Nice.
Which is nearly finished. I'm taking a big risk saying that because I haven't actually shown it to Burroughs yet, but I will, and I'm hoping they love it.
You want to hold the cover up a little bit closer to the camera?
I just love this cover, I have to say. I asked them to make her look like Salma Hayek, but not so much. That was her suit.
Hold it right over your face.
There you go. Beautiful.
Lift it up.
Perfect.
There we
make
go.
her look like Salma Hayek, and I think they did a beautiful job.
Beautiful.
It's a lovely cover.
Gorgeous cover. Gorgeous cover.
Gorgeous. All right. I see Sharon had her hand up. Sharon.
And I always have a Dreamcast in my head.
I had my hand up, but I don't have my book with me. Isn't that silly? So I actually have a tip for people who are interested in writing.
Right.
I have several tips, but I'll just give a few. I have on my blog, I have my top 10 tips for people who want to write romance. And the first one is be persistent. One of the things that, I always try to reiterate to people that writing is not you do it once and it's perfect. It's you have to write and rewrite and revise, and you really must be persistent. And you need to be your own best editor. When you submit a manuscript, make sure it's the cleanest possible book that you could submit, because no publishers really want to spend, even though they work with developmental editors, you want them to know that you've worked very hard on this to give them a clean manuscript. So persistence and clean manuscript are my top two tips.
I love it. They're worth $1 million. Adrianne.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, I always love giving advice because I feel like that's what I wanted when I started jumping into the writing world. And I agree, persistence is huge. Also, don't stop writing. I think sometimes, well, actually, most of the time when I'm talking to new authors, they always say how they feel like they're stuck because they tend to edit what they've already written, and then they don't finish their manuscripts because they're always editing and editing. Yes. So don't worry about it being crap. It is going to be crap, and that's okay. Just finish the thing, and then you can go back and look at it maybe from a whole picture and see where you need to fix the problems. And don't stop reading either.
Time and step back and give yourself some breathing room and then come back.
Yes. But give yourself permission to be a crummy writer, and then you'll finish it. And then you can get better when you edit. And don't forget to keep reading. Read the genres that you want to write. It is called market research. It's super important. And good luck. You can find me on Amazon, Adrianne Monson. And Adrianne Monson is on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well.
Okay. And Sharon, if you want to, what I admire most about you, Susan, sorry, not Sharon, Susan, is all these awards, and you're prolific. And obviously there's a lot of self-discipline that you apply to your writing. Tell us about how have you achieved all this, all these titles and 10 screenwriting awards.
Well, when I first started writing professionally back in 2012, I was on a bug, and I probably wrote within a year. I probably wrote about 5 books. And when I got the first one published, of course, I had all these books ready and waiting to go out with the publisher, just needing a bit of editing. And that gave me a real step up as to having some back material to actually submit to them. I do work full time. I'm actually in compliance and regulatory in the financial services industry in the legal side. So I do work full time as well. So it was a case of just coming home and writing till 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and the family going without dinner. The dog didn't get a pat. It was just those sorts of things. And they were very understanding about it. But I have most definitely slacked off lately because I don't feel the same, strangely enough, I don't feel the same passion as I did in those early years. And I take things a lot slower now, and I tend to just write what I fancy writing. I've had my heyday back when I first started. The market now is very saturated, very competitive. When I started writing gay romance, I would go onto Kindle and find 6 or 7 books that have been published that month. We're now having up to 350 to 400 releases a month. So it has grown. Yes, in gay romance.
In gay romance.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the gay romance side, yeah. It has become absolutely, it's become a genre everybody wants to write. And we've got, US today best-selling authors moving from male-female into MM now. It's all good for the genre, but it does make it difficult to sell your books.
Well, ladies, thank you so very much. This was a very lively, very informative session. I hope I didn't drive you too hard. And look up the names of the speakers, watchers, and listeners. Find us on the BookFest Fall 2021. You can find each speaker there and their contact website address. You can find their books. There's links to everything. So thank you for joining us. This is the Romance Panel, over and out. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye. Keep reading. Bye-bye.